Good morning, guys. Welcome to Being Human with me, Nat Rich. And this morning I'm with Harry Uda. I've just pronounced your name correctly. How are you, Harry?
I'm doing good, Nat. So
Good.
excited for this conversation.
I know it's the first of many that we're going to have. So this is
First of
basically,
many.
we're going to be talking this morning about boundaries. And Harry is a relationship coach. And do you want to give yourself a bit of an introduction? Because I think you'll say it better than I will.
Yeah. I think the best way to describe what I do is I try to help people cultivate meaning in their relational lives. And, that starts with the relationship you have with yourself, right? And that influences or informs the way that you show up in your dealings with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of us, from when we're born and socialized through childhood, we've adopted an external model for what a relationship should be.
Yeah.
Right? That's usually based around the relationships that we are privy to, either in our familial homes or maybe some close friends, etc. And I think that for a lot of us, we don't take a step back to ask ourselves, well, what does a relationship really represent to me? And why do I like, where does that idea come from? So when I think relationship, what comes to mind? Where does it come from?
Mm-hmm.
And, that image that is conjured up, does that align with, who I am on the inside? And so I love to take my clients into that space where we can start to ask these questions and explore, create a space for exploration that for a lot of people, they perhaps have never had that space, right? They don't want to, who do you talk to about a lot of this stuff? You don't want to feel like you're being judged.
Yeah.
You don't want to speak out of turn. Perhaps you're used to playing a certain role in your life, and as a consequence of that, you don't want to break character, right? So yeah, I think in a nutshell, that's what I do.
That was better than I could have explained it. I was like, relationship coach, done.
Yeah. No, you're
No.
very kind.
Well, I wanted to talk to you this morning about boundaries, which is a big, big subject that we have at the moment. And what we mean by the term boundaries is limits that you are willing to go to or that you have around your life that basically other people can comply with or that they don't know are there, and they can become very difficult. So, for example, if you are with a person, with a partner, and they've cheated on you once, are you going to continue your relationship with that person? But after that, do you have a boundary? Is it like a hell no, I'm not going there anymore? Or is it like, okay, I can get through this, I can work through this? So a boundary is something that you would set in a relationship or within a friendship or just with yourself.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that this morning. I've got some questions for you
love it.
around your personal boundaries, and then obviously what you may see with clients as well.
Yeah.
So
Let's
first of
dive
all,
in.
boundaries. When was your kind of first understanding of the term of a boundary, and kind of, was it a hard lesson, or did it something that you learned and thought you should apply to your life?
For me, it was, so I was in a relationship where I felt as though I was constantly getting triggered by my partner's actions. So I wasn't quite sure. I was like, why does her behavior upset me so much? Right. So I started to question myself, and I'm like, is this a me problem, or, am I being overbearing, or, what's going on? And sort of in the aftermath of that relationship, I was sort of doing an audit of everything that had happened, right? Trying to just trying to gain more insight, because it had quite a tumultuous ending, not the ending that I would have liked, right? So, but then the beautiful thing about, sort of heartbreaks in that sense is you're forced to look at things differently, right? Because your model and whatever conception you had, for what love was, or what your journey would be with this person, that sort of withered away. So on exploring a lot of the pain that I felt, particularly towards the end, it became clear to me that there was an issue on my end around making my boundaries known, right? So communicating my boundaries, because I felt in certain in certain situations I was almost ashamed of certain boundaries that I had.
Can you give us
So,
an example?
oh yeah. So one of them for me was, at the time, male friends. Male friends. So my challenge at the time was how much intimacy should she have with other men, right?
Good.
And it was something that I so badly wanted to explore, but if I bring this up, am I then labeled, the insecure boyfriend, right? So what do? I sort of keep things to myself, and then anxiety starts to fester, and you're not having that conversation, right? So the other person doesn't know that certain boundaries are being crossed, right? And it's like a domino effect. It's just one thing after the next before you know it, you're sort of in an emotional frenzy. So that would be an example.
So in terms of like, when you say, it's interesting that you say, so your partner at the time didn't know that you heard about that your boundaries were being crossed, but at the same time, you wouldn't have necessarily known what your boundaries were until they were crossed.
That's that's a really good point. That's a really good point, right? Sometimes it takes certain boundaries being crossed for you to realize, oh, this is actually really important to me, right? Because I get this disorientating feeling, right, when this situation it was almost like I was like just electricity, just so yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. How could I have known had they not been crossed?
Yeah, because it's the body responds, and the body lets us know, usually before an event sometimes, where especially for women, we have this intuition, women's intuition. We seem to know everything. And guys are like, how do you know that? It's just like, I don't know. And it's very difficult, especially for some guys, I could assume, is in the sense of they're not used to sharing their feelings. They're not used to actually saying what they really feel or think. And by keeping themselves quiet in that sense, actually communicating what bothers them doesn't usually come out until they're probably a little bit more relaxed, which is usually where they've had a drink or maybe some drugs. And then they're like, well, actually, and then you get it all. And you're not really getting, you're not getting a fair argument. I'm going to call it an argument, not in a negative sense, but you're not getting a fair conversation. That's what we'll call it. You're not having a fair conversation about what's truly at play here, but the feelings do need to come out at some point, and often they come out when we've had a drink or when we feel a little bit more relaxed, and that's when everybody's trying to enjoy themselves. It's like, well, why are you bringing it out now? And it's because you can't help it sometimes. It's just, or it comes out in anger and rage. For something else, and you think that they're going nuts at the smallest thing, and actually they're going nuts because they haven't shared how they truly feel.
This is true, and I can attest to that. I can attest to to letting my anger and rage sort of get the better of me on account of not having expressed what I was feeling on the inside. So you sort of have this combustible moment, and the very thing that you were trying to preserve, this sort of false sense of harmony, well, that gets blown wide open anyway. So, on reflection, I would much rather have a difficult conversation under the right conditions than to let things get to a point where I just sort of blow up.
And this is the essence of the Talkwards. What we're doing on, which you'll be a part of, which is the Talkward series that we have for I Am Sound Radio. And it's awkward talks about things that matter. Or depending on who I'm talking to, it's awkward talks about shit that matters. It's like, it's stuff that people would, it's however you want to term that. It's so important. We were saying just before the call is that you asked me why I, like these conversations, and why I go for these subjects. And it's very much because I know my level of growth has expanded so much through my, ability to have difficult conversations and to go into my difficult feelings. And my understanding of the world now is far more accepting, far more okay with being in this unknown state and being in the confusion than I was before. Because before I was, I had these set of beliefs, and, for guys, their belief might be like, well, Why has my girlfriend got a male friend? I don't believe that's, I don't believe that's the right thing. And, there's no kind of, because they've got that tight belief. And this is not just me having to go around, guys. I'm just saying, just as an example, it could be
hurting my feelings.
Hurting
my feelings.
So the same for women. Women might be like, well, why is that girl your friend? Because we get this, we have this lovely idea, and it's a magical idea if the world was working like that. But, when you meet someone, they only have eyes for you. And you're like, oh, you only fancy me out of all the 9 billion people or whatever it is that we have on the planet. You only have eyes for me. And you're like in this illusion where you've been told that that's the case. So if anything jeopardizes that thought, if anything comes into that where you're like, I've just seen you look at that person. What are you looking at that person for?
Oh, absolutely.
It challenges your core belief, and that
threatens our own sense of security and just our sense of self.
Yeah, and that's difficult because that's unknown. You haven't been there before, and that's when jealousy comes in, and that's when confusion comes in. So it's a horrible place to go because you haven't dealt with that horribleness before. I am a pro at dealing with horrible, awkward conversations. Now I'm able to have them with anyone about anything, and I've got a show called The Talkwards because I've developed a skill of having those awkward conversations and not running from them and being sober in those spaces for a long, long time. And that has given me a skill where if something's unknown, like I don't know what's going on the planet right now, but I'm okay with it in the sense of I have faith. If I had a belief it should be different, I'd be struggling, but I have faith it will be okay. So belief and faith are different.
Ooh, so if I like that distinction.
Yeah, so if you have a belief in your partner should not be doing anything, and that's your core belief, that's going to stick you to that feeling. There's no growth there. There's no expansion. But if you had faith that your partner wouldn't do anything to hurt you, it doesn't matter who she's with. It doesn't matter where they are because you have a greater sense of faith, and a belief holds you to a space. Yeah. And it's, it's a difference. And I have faith in, people say, oh, do you believe in God? I'm like, hell yeah. I want to believe that there's a dude in the sky that talks to me one-on-one. Whenever I've got a problem, it's on tap. It's available to me. And I joke around it, but I know that's not the case, but I know that there's something great. I have faith that there's something greater than I am. If it's not a dude in the sky and it happens to be a pink unicorn that is running everything, I'm sweet with it being a pink unicorn. It doesn't have to be a dude in the sky. It doesn't have to be a certain religion, because it's not a belief. It's a faith that I ask a question and it gets answered, and that's what I lead my life with. So there's a space, there's like a expansion within that. Right. And it allows for greater fluidity of thought and feeling.
And I can see that as sort of a gateway to acceptance, because when we have these sort of crystallized beliefs and you have a situation playing out that flies in the face of our beliefs, then there's a problem with acceptance, right? I don't want to accept this because I'm so entangled in this idea, and it's not this way and it has to be this way, or this is wrong, or it's just very, very interesting. I like that. I like that dichotomy.
It's the only way I know how to handle situations now with myself, is that I don't know everything, and I'm okay with not knowing everything, but I'm sure as hell going to go out and find some answers and find what I can, because I'm that person. I'm a Gemini. I'm inquisitive. I love to look around and see what's going on and ask all these questions. And I find it often, especially like what's going on now in the world. It's like, if you look at conspiracies, for example, so many people, like I did a show the other day saying not everything is a conspiracy, but a lot of those conspiracies are very good questions that haven't yet been answered in sufficient ways.
This is true. But we sort of just dismiss these things, right? We want to brush it off. Well, once it's labeled conspiracy, then, I'm not going to spend any more of my intellectual resources on a conspiracy. Right?
Exactly. I'm so glad you said that. So it's when people say, I'm not going to spend any more of my intellectual capacity or time on these conspiracy theories. Because they push it to one side, and there's an arrogance with not taking on that information, because you think what you know is correct. You'll never know anything new. And
powerful.
people learn a lot of the intellect. I mean, I've got some really intellectual friends that I think are incredible at what they do, but some of them won't go anywhere near a conspiracy theory. And I'm like, we need your kind of mind on it, because you think so greatly in such a way. You could help find this actual answer to this, not the one that everybody's jumping to. But I find that, especially around this subject, is that if you, this is just the way I think about it, in the way that I see it, is that, so you have a planet full of people, and everyone's rolling around, and everyone starts thinking, something's not quite right. This feels weird. Okay, so I'm going to go and ask some questions, and I'm going to go and look for some answers. So the first thing you do is you go and look at what's going on the planet, and you're like, okay, so we have all this money, but we have all this technology, and we still have more problems than we've ever had on the planet. Something doesn't add up. What do? You follow the money. So you follow the money, and then you start looking around. So everything is to do with money these days. So you go down this path, and you're looking at the money. And as you keep going down this path, it gets a little bit darker, and a little bit darker, and a little bit darker, and a little bit more fucked up. And then you go, oh, somehow I ended up in some kind of weird satanic pedophile space, and I don't know what's going on. And is the world going to end? And everybody who opens up their minds and looks at this stuff goes to that place. Now, for me, I don't know if that place exists or not, but if everybody gets there, something in it's existing. And also, we have to look at the space that, in the sense of, if everybody goes there, I would love there to be a different answer. I would love to wake up and go, oh, there's a different ending to this story, but this is the current ending that everyone gets to. So no matter how dark it is, and no matter how far-fetched it might sound, being willing to look at that information and not have a hard boundary and be like, no, I'm not, because this, and go off in another way, being willing to look at that information and come through the other side of it and actually go, okay, so I understand that, and go on with your life. That would be the right thing to do. But what we don't have at the moment is people go there, they come back to people and tell their story of what they found. And the people who haven't bothered to look, who don't want to look, or who think they've looked enough and they're going to leave it now, they call you conspiracy theorist. They hate you. They belittle you. They make fun of you. They challenge your knowledge in such a way that it's arrogant. It's not like a normal conversation. It's not like a conversation like this. It's a, no, you're wrong, and this is why. And you get the real argumentative arrogance around these subjects. And that, for me, that makes me really understand where people are. So it doesn't matter how many books you've read, or how intelligent you are, or how many times you've been to university, or how many certificates you could be, eating your dinner off. I don't care. If you can't remain calm when you have a conversation, you've not learned anything. And regardless of how much knowledge you've packed into that, it's your capacity to share knowledge and to receive knowledge and to engage with knowledge that makes you a great person. And if you can't have those conversations because you're judging the other person, that is a very sad place that we're in. And
What
were you say?
No, I think that's really, it's really interesting. I find that there tends to be this notion that if, let's say, you have an idea, right? If I entertain your idea, so if I try it on, to some, to try on an idea, to entertain an idea, is synonymous with condoning an idea or aligning with an idea. But I think that, it's immensely beneficial to try on a new idea. And then, even if you conclude that, you know what, this doesn't sit well with me, this doesn't align, at least you're coming to that conclusion from an informed place, right? Not from this sort of arrogant, overly sort of skeptical, closed, disposition towards a new idea. It's like going to a clothes store or something, and you see a jacket that you like, and you try it on. Oh, I like this fit, or I don't like this fit, right? But you got to try it on first to see how you look in the fabric, or how you know what I mean. So I think you're spot on. I think there's so much power in exploration.
There is, and this is such an important part. The exploration is the right word, because if you're going shopping for new ideas, and you go into a store of new ideas, and say you're looking for a jacket, for example. So the jacket is the conspiracy, for example.
Yeah.
And you go into this store and you try on this jacket and it doesn't quite look right. And you're thinking, not really sure about this one. It doesn't feel right. You keep going looking for other jackets because that's what you ultimately want to get.
Right,
so you look for other jackets. So you look for other conspiracies, and you try and find one that fits and that you like. So people are out there doing that. They're looking at these things. They're trying to find one that fits to make sense of. The problem that we have is when we're jacket/conspiracy shopping is that if we are certain that what we already think we know is still a thing, and we've got that solid belief that, it's not ever going to fit us, and we're already going in with the intention that we're not going to find a jacket. Because we already believe it doesn't exist.
Right.
Metaphysically, you ain't going to find a jacket that fits you because you're already programming what it is that you can find and that you can see and that you're trying on. So if that makes sense, in the sense of if you're trying on ideas, conspiracies, whatever they are, but you already have the intention that that's absolute bullshit and you're not going to believe it, and you're trying to find out why it's bullshit, that's what you're going to go in and that's what you're going to come out with. There's no growth with that intention.
Preach.
Yeah, there's no growth for that there's literally, I am not going to find a jacket and I'm going to prove to you why I can't find a jacket, and off you go and you don't find a jacket. And it's like Roald Dahl says, it's like those who don't believe in magic shall never be the ones to find it.
I love that. And
it's such a beautiful little, thing, but this comes to the essence. I know we've gone on a bit of a conspiracy rant, which somehow always happens in my life, but we're getting there. But when you bring it back to boundaries and you bring it back to relationships, say if boy meets girl and boy has this real thing where he's like, it's a hard no, my girlfriend is not allowed male friends. Hard no. And she's there going, oh, but I've just got, a gay male friend, and I've got this friend, and I've got this friend, and there's nothing in it. And they go on with this relationship, and this boundary keeps being crossed because this guy's got a hard no.
Yeah, right.
There's no growth there for her to ever change his mind. So she's flogging a dead horse trying to change his mind, and he's, saying to her, I already know that you exist and I know that you've got all these friends, but now I want you to comply with how I think. So you're not allowed those friends anymore, and you have
because
to
I am the grand orchestrator. I'm the puppet master.
Because I am so certain on this is it. So this is the belief that's holding him in place, is fixed. And this is what you have when you have relationships or conspiracies. You have this fixed belief that everybody else is wrong before you go in it, and there's no growth there.
Spot on. I think it's very important to remember, or perhaps acknowledge, that there's an infinite amount of philosophies, that one could adopt for how they want to live their life, right? So it's important to be wary and not elevate our own philosophies above all else, right? Or above, what may be appropriate. Like, this is the only way, if I think you shouldn't have male friends, well, this is the right way. This is how you live life. This is how you show you're a committed partner. And if your behavior falls outside the parameters of these beliefs, then you're not committed.
Yeah. And it's death.
Yeah.
Certain death to the relationship, because there's no compromise. And we don't all have to agree. Our boundaries don't always have to align, but we have to respect them, because it's somebody might have a boundary that makes absolutely no sense to you whatsoever, but allow them to have their experience. And what I mean by that is, if somebody's come up with a hard no, there's usually a hard life behind them. And that's why they've come up with a hard no. There's a hard problem behind them that have given them that definitely not going there again. I am right. See you later. So it comes with trauma, and not that, what happened to you when you were 6 and let's bring all that up. It's not that. It's just sometimes traumas can be the smallest of things that can hurt the most and can give us this level of like, I can't, they daren't even expand on their boundary because they don't know what that looks like beyond that. So we have to know, when you connect with someone and when you have a relationship with someone, it's figuring out what their boundaries are. Obviously they're going to come up over time, but like in the beginning, having an open conversation. I strongly believe in having connections above relationship. So relationships are sacred. It's where you dedicate your life and your time to someone, and you want to grow with that person. You can see the benefit of growing with that person, and there's a dual goal. You both have a very similar mindset. A connection, however, is where you can connect with someone. You can still be having sex with them. You can still explore them, but you have a connection. You establish that there is a connection. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm kind of seeing someone, but I'm not. You do have a connection, but that's the playground of where you figure out who the hell that person is and whether you actually want to spend the rest of your life with them or want to spend the next year with them. It's like you gel in this connection. And I've been single for 12 years in January, which is a long time. And people go, what? But I'm all right. Like, I'm okay. And my guy's out there and he will arrive in whatever shape or form. And I'm okay with that because I have faith. Now, if I had a belief that I should have had a boyfriend by the time I was 30, I'd be pissed off right now. And
right.
So there's this kind of whole thing that I've allowed this kind of thing to be let go. It's unknown. I don't know who he is. Whatever's going to happen, it's fine. But when I meet a guy, the old version of me before I had this faith was like, oh, you could be my guy. Okay. And I'd try and find all the reasons that this person could be my guy. And even if I would miss the most obvious things that make him not my guy, the red flags that were there, I would be trying so hard to put this guy into this box that I'd created in my mind. I would miss the blinding obvious stuff where we're like, oh, we might not be compatible. And I now give myself that space is where I meet someone. I'm like, okay, I'm having a connection. And I'm very open. I'm very vulnerable. Sometimes that scares the life out of them. But I'm very eager to see who they are and to grow with them. And I have interesting and deep conversations. And that gives me the space to not get it so wrong. And I mean, we're all going to make things wrong at certain points, but it gives me a chance to actually go, I'm taking it steady. Because otherwise, I could be really pushing on that. If I didn't know them, and I wasn't getting to know them, I could be doing things in my life that just trotting along, absolutely fine, but killing them because my boundary is mixed with theirs and I'm not aware of them and I'm just hurting this person. And I don't want to hurt someone.
That's very conscientious of you.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't want to hurt someone because I had really awful relationships when I was younger that were highly abusive, and I don't want to go back into that. I very much doubt I'd go back into that, but I also am very aware that I had a role to play in those relationships as well. And I was, trigger happy TV. I will have done things because I was a very sociable and chatty girl that pissed them off fundamentally. But I kept going with that person and knowing that they didn't like me talking to anyone and me going, well, that's never going to change because I'm a talker. And actually what I should have said is maybe we're not the right fit. And rather than us remaining in this abusive relationship, it's a hard no. And I think you're great, but maybe we can't do that. And I didn't have the responsibility within myself to have those conversations. So now I don't want to get into those situations again because it's not fair on them either, regardless of how abusive that they were. I push their boundaries. And this is why it's so important to kind of establish them together.
So interesting. So interesting the way that you look at it and the way that you distinguish between, the pain that you felt and the fact that, their boundaries were crossed. It's very interesting because we tend to have this sort of all or nothing thinking where, if there was pain, that's all I see, right? If my relationship ended on a sour note, well, then that's how I think of the relationship, period.
Yeah.
Whereas what we're really doing is we're sort of conflating the entire relationship with our feelings around the way in which things ended. So I think it's so interesting to sort of put things in different silos. It can sort of give us some space to, I want to say, depersonalize to an extent, right? Where I sort of get out of, here, and I can sort of take a step back and acknowledge, how I feel, about the situation, how I feel about what went on, but then also, look at, well, what was the experience like for them, right? Doesn't mean I condone the things that went on.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's really interesting. That's where the real, like we mentioned earlier, that's where the growth comes from.
Yeah.
Right. Being able to say, oh, here's how I feel about what happened. I don't stand for this. I don't want to experience this again moving forward. But hey, what role did I play in that situation? That's a very difficult question to contend with, right? Because now I got to look at myself. I got to look at myself, and there's self-criticism can be one of the most uncomfortable things to have to experience, right?
Yeah,
very interesting.
I'm very honest with myself. I got into relationships that were fundamentally wrong in many levels, and I didn't have the confidence or the awareness to be able to get myself out of them at the key times, and that was my role in it, because I'd not learned enough. And I could sit and play victim for the rest of my life, and I could sit and blame them for the rest of my life, but I'm carrying around that pain and that trauma in my body somewhere, and I'm holding on to it, but I have a choice to let that go, just by merely understanding it and saying, well, actually, did I want to go through those experiences? Not in my logical here today sense, no, but for some reason the conscious version of me, the spiritual version of me, took me through those experiences, and I've learned a tremendous, if I look at it from a spiritual perspective, wow, I've learned the most about myself out of the conflicts that I've had in my life, and those were horrific conflicts. And I don't hate those people for what they've done. And I got interviewed the other day about the Me Too movement and the cancel culture, and I was very honest, and I said, I've been through some horrific experiences, and those experiences have shaped me to who I am today, and have allowed me to literally give that advice to other people when they've asked me, and I'm going, whoa, don't go there. I've been there, maybe try this.
Right.
And I've saved some of the biggest catastrophes known to my friends, because I've actually given the advice before and been like, hey, no. So my awful suffering and victim state that I was in, was exactly what I needed to learn that there's an opposite side to that, and it's a more empowered state, and there's more choices in that, and there's more faith in that, and giving the information of having both experiences can help someone else in their experience. And I'm not saving the day all the time, but what I'm saying is that I've learned how not to do it, and I don't hate those people, even though I've got boundaries would I go into a relationship with you again? Hell no. Like, do I want to go on a picnic with you? Not really. I don't, but if you needed me because I'm a human, and you needed me in some way, and it was logical and it felt right to do so, I can step up and be there for you, regardless of what we've gone through. And that makes me have a level of peace within myself, because I know that I don't hold on to any anger for them. I don't hold on to any, pain for them. It was a shit situation, but I got myself out of it in the end. But I had to be pushed and pushed and pushed. And my boundaries were how my boundary, unfortunately, was, this person slept with 5 of your friends behind your back in the last 3 years. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a boundary. That might be a boundary. But before that, I was being beaten up and abused in many different ways. And that wasn't a boundary. So I had to go through so much stuff to get to my boundary. I'm a ninja when it comes to my boundaries, because I can set those things like that, but not in a way where it's angry either. I can be like, well, this is a hard no, and I'm going to explain why it's my boundary, and then we can work on it. Because it's not always, oh my God, definitely not. But it's there's to be able to work on it. But I wanted to share some boundaries with you, actually.
I was just going to ask you to share some. So
these are the boundaries that I have made up. So if you can see here, so there's 4 boundaries that we have. 0 boundaries cross over with other people's boundaries. So you'll feel like a victim, or that you're being manipulated in some way if you have 0 boundaries. And many people come from this space where they do have 0 boundaries. So it's important to know that if you've got no boundaries, this is where you are in the yellow. You then go on to hard boundaries. So usually if something's happened to you before and it's a problem for you, the hard boundary is there because you're protecting yourself. Your ego has set up a space where you're like, never again, it's not going to happen. These are unnecessary imaginary walls and hard thoughts about why you don't want to experience it again. And they're blocks that you've built and you've kept up inside so you can keep people out.
So interesting.
Basically, you don't want anybody to hurt you, so you put down this hard wall. But there's no movement in that. There's no growth. Behind the scenes, it's just writing stuff down. And then you've got messy boundaries, which are a mix of hard and 0 boundaries. So they're different for different people and for different areas in your life. And that, although you might think, well, yeah, this person's got this boundary and this person's got this boundary, but by having continuously changing boundaries with different people, they're very uncertain and they're confusing, and they confuse and frustrate both you and other people, because you might have a boundary for one and not for another, and then it might really hurt someone. But you actually, they might have done something more to you, but this is where your forgiveness comes in. Your forgiveness comes into this messy area, because to forgive people and set a boundary for yourself is kind for you and them. But most people set boundaries to keep other people out rather than to keep everyone out. And there's a kind of it's a bit interchangeable, really, but it's not the best place to come from. And then the last one is brilliant boundaries. So brilliant boundaries is that you understand what the benefits of boundaries are. You have them set in your life correctly, so they're fair to you and they're fair to other people, and people know your boundaries, so they know they don't push past them. And once people start to know your boundaries, they start to realize that who you are, what you would stand for, what you wouldn't, and it basically builds up your personality, your state of who you are, and people can easily connect with that because you are consistent in who you are, because your boundaries are consistent. They're not always changing. And that way people don't feel like they're being exploited in any way. They're just, oh, this person's got firm boundaries and I'm not going to push that because I don't want to. But it allows you to really understand yourself if you have boundaries set up. But unfortunately, the way to learn boundaries is like you're going, hey, universe, I want to learn boundaries. So it's going to send you all the awkward situations in, and you're going to be like, oh, I have to test it. This is like a live test for a boundary, because you're going to get someone who pisses you off for something completely random. And the universe is like, so how do you feel about this? And then where's your boundary? So you can only learn these on the fly as you go. But if you're willing to sign up to the latest universal school of boundaries, the lessons are free.
Sign me up.
Yeah, the lessons are free. They're there. They're flying at you at all costs. And you're like, oh my God, I wish I'd never done this. But you're learning, and you'll bring in the best people. The people will test your boundaries like you can never even imagine. Because they're doing you a service. They're existing in your life to show you the mirror, and then you can respond. And that's when you can learn. But to know it's a game, and to know it's that lesson, as it's not necessarily a lesson, it's more of a remembering, really, but you remember rather than learning something new. Because if I told you something, it feels like you already know it. You're like, oh yeah, I get that. It's not something new. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that. And you're remembering how you feel when somebody crosses your boundaries.
This is so interesting. And so a question that sort of popped into my head when you were talking about, the different boundaries, right? 0, hard, messy, brilliant, right? How do you distinguish between a sort of hard boundary, so this is a hard no, and a firm boundary? What is the distinction?
So firm, so basically a hard boundary usually comes with a hell of a lot of feeling, brings up almost like traumas from the past and thoughts and processes where it's just a definite no. And usually you don't want to go into that space. So you get very agitated, you get very angry. A firm boundary is, for example, what could be a boundary? Okay, so I would be dating a guy. Okay. And he is looking at other women and noticing how hot they are. Okay. So fact of life, it's going to happen. If I didn't like that, I'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And I would stop and I would switch, and my anger would be there. And I'd be like, this is a hell no. I don't want that. So I get angry and I bring with that with it. Now, for me, I don't want my guy to be looking at everyone all the time, but I'm aware that he's a human and he's a guy, and that's a thing. I can allow for that. But there's a part of me where I'd say, hey, it doesn't really make me feel comfortable with you looking at everyone. I know you're a guy, but can you either try and be discreet, or can you give me a little bit more attention, because I'd like some right now. So it's a firm boundary, but I've connected with him in a different way, and I've expressed how I feel. It's a firm this makes me feel uncomfortable, but I'm not going to hit you in the head for it.
You know what's so interesting about that? I'm sort of, as you were sharing that, I was putting myself on the other side of the equation, and I was just thinking, well, what you've done there is you have sort of you've given me room to understand where you're coming from. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden, if you're somebody that I care for, I'm compassionate towards. I mean, just the fact that you were able to articulate that in the first place, because I mean, it takes vulnerability, right, to even to even voice that out. So all of a sudden my response or my reaction to that is completely different than if it were like, how dare you, like, why are you looking at everyone, what is your problem, da, 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 da. So when it comes from a sort of antagonistic adversarial place, even if you have a genuine reason, and I'm speaking for myself personally, even if you have a genuine reason to be upset, once you take this sort of antagonistic approach, all of a sudden I'm shutting down. I'm resisting. I'm resisting.
Yeah,
right.
It's like being told off by your mom. You're like,
oh yeah.
You don't want it.
I don't want to go through that. But if you can give me more insight into, like you mentioned earlier, here's why this is important to me, and also you're giving me a bit of leeway, right? You're acknowledging my humanity, and you're telling me what just doesn't make me feel very comfortable, that, et cetera, et cetera. That's a completely different proposition. And I think that's very powerful for anyone listening. That is very, very, very interesting.
I feel like also, I've learned to communicate through being an expert at awkwards. I have manifested the most random, bizarre situations in my life that have taught me how to not communicate. I've lost the love of my life through the actions of my mouth, and not in a good way. I literally said things that were you just wouldn't say, but because I lost that person or lost those people in my life because of how I spoke, I remember that, and I'm like, whoa, I need to curb it. I could be quite lemony in the past. Is like lemony is, it can really get to someone if you can be quite, bitter. And I used to be quite bitter. So instead of
I can attest to that.
Yeah. And instead of communicating, hey, like, for example, I dated this, I wasn't really dating. I don't know what it was. We had a situationship rather than a relationship.
Okay.
Situationship. And he used to say, hey, yeah, let's go for lunch. It'd be great to see you. I'd be like, okay. So we go for lunch, and I'd be looking forward to it. I'd be really excited. And we'd go at 2:00 or whatever. And he'd turn up at like 2:45. I don't know if there's something loud in the background. Can you hear that? I don't know.
I think, yeah. I think it's must be one of my siblings. I'm gonna send him a quick message.
Yeah. If you need to jump off, I can hold the fort. I don't mind. I think it's gone down now, isn't it? I don't mind. I can go and tell him. Like,
okay. I might just a quick note.
Yeah,
I will be back.
No, that's fine. We can hold the space. There you go. This is what happens in normal life. But yeah, obviously, if you are interested in watching the show today and you like what we're talking about, please do subscribe. I'm trying to build up my subscriber basis, and I'm new to YouTube, and I don't have any other social media because I don't believe in it. And so I'm limiting myself somewhat, but I am happy in the process. So if you do like it, please share it. And if you have any questions, you can put some details below. That would be amazing, and we will get back to you in whatever way we can, probably very quickly, because it's not like we're doing much at the moment. The world isn't really keeping me busy. And there we are, back like I never left. Yeah, exactly. I can't actually remember what we were saying now. So we were saying a situationship.
Right.
So this situationship would be the situation would be, hey, we're going to go for lunch. And we'd go for lunch, and it would be a 2:00 meeting, and this guy would turn up at like 22, 2:45. So I'd be waiting all of this time. So I'd be there, really excited to see him, and then being like, is he coming? Is he not? Was he going? He'd not responding to his phone. And then, anybody that you stand up for a period of time is going to be going, this is awkward. So you're there feeling awkward, feeling agitated, feeling vulnerable, feeling like you're not loved, going through rejection, feeling stupid, feeling embarrassed. Then this dude rocks up. It's like, hey, how you doing? Just swinging in. And I'm like, what? Like, I couldn't speak. So I would be like, fine, I'm fine. Not fine, because fine means fucking incapable of normal emotions. And at the time, I was incapable of normal emotions.
I like that.
And I was so angry, and I'm like, what? Oh my God. And it really hurt me. And I used to say to him, you don't turn up on time, or you're not here. And he'd be like, why are you always having a go at me? Why? Because I was having a go at him, because he had done something that went beyond my boundary, but I loved him so much, and I didn't want to not see him. So I allowed him just to ruin it, because I wanted to see him so much. and I had no boundaries enough to speak of, and I didn't know what they were, and I couldn't go, this really hurts me when you don't turn up. This is, instead of going, I feel really vulnerable and rejected and lonely, and when you don't turn up it makes me feel uncomfortable, which he could have gone, oh my God, I'm sorry, let's deal with this. But instead of that, and I'm like, I'm fine, yeah, cool. Like, this attitude would be at the table, just like, and he'd be like, I haven't seen you for ages, why are you like that? And then I'd just flip. And I wasn't the best version of myself because I was coming from a space of pain rather than from, ownership, because I had no ownership over my feelings. And that for me was really difficult. But my constant, I've said things to him that I wanted to reach out and say, I love you, I want to spend time with you, I I really do appreciate you, I think you're amazing, that's why I love you so much. None of that was coming out of my mouth at all. Giving off the wrong signals and being a moody bitch. But also he was doing things that were making me like that, and also wasn't communicating either. So we had a real lack of communication, and this is why it's so important to learn how to communicate, because it's not just asking for something in another language. Like, if you don't know how to say it properly, you get a little how do I ask for a coffee in Spanish? And you're like, now I know how to say café con leche, por favor. I can and I get my cup of coffee. But if I don't, then I'm like, oh, I feel weird. So it's so important just to learn communication, because you need it, whether it's a cup of coffee or whether you need to tell somebody that you feel really vulnerable. You need that skill.
Absolutely.
We never got taught at school.
I think that's really powerful, because again, that vulnerability allows me to understand exactly what your pain point is, right? So then I'm out of this, because perhaps to me, right, I've been showing up late all my life, right? This is sort of my norm, right? And perhaps up until this point, my friends, my family, everyone has sort of just accepted this is just how Harry is. Look, you gotta love him. That's just how he is, right? Yeah. All of a sudden, I meet you, and this is one of your boundaries that I've crossed. But for the first time, you're giving me, from my perspective, you're giving me this attitude, and I'm thinking, why is she so uptight? Right? Why is she so uptight? What the hell is your problem? Like, I'm not even that late. It's only been an hour, right?
An hour, I'd be going nuts. I'd have left.
but perhaps that's my thing, and perhaps I like to think that I'm always fashionably late, right? Perhaps this is the narrative, right? That I've sort of evolved with. But once you're able to be vulnerable, it creates a bid. So what you're doing there is you're creating a bid for understanding. Yeah. Right? You create that bid for understanding, and that allows me to be compassionate.
Yeah.
Unless I'm just a dick and I don't really care, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's interesting in the sense of, if you don't turn up on time, okay, once or twice, fine, these things happen. But usually, if that's the state that someone's living in terms of they're always late, there's a level of avoidance within that lateness that they're not comfortable with sharing, and there's a level of resistance. And if they can't share that, they'll just be late, and then they will use the terms of like fashionably late. It's like when when people say, oh, a leopard can't change its spots. It's one of those terms that, have you ever met a leopard that wants to change its spots? They don't exist. It's a weird sentence that people say just to confirm something that doesn't actually exist. And it's the same thing as fashionably late. And I remember I had a friend of mine. I have to tell you this story as well. So I had a friend of mine. I won't say his name. Okay. And he was relatively late all the time. And but when I used to go, you're late, and he'd be like, and he was a black guy, and he's like, it's black man time, innit? It's just we called it lilt time. If you remember the lilt, totally tropical
lilt, yeah.
It was like everything's just whenever it happens, no need to stress. So he was the lilt man, right? So he would turn up late. And I remember saying to him once, I would just wait around, and then one day he's late, and I'm thinking, lilt man or no lilt man, love this dude, not tolerating it anymore. So I left. And I left and went to, this was a night out we were meant to be having. And I left the night out. I went somewhere else. I met these other people, and they were like, oh, do you want to go? I was like, yeah. So I'm off raving where I'm raving, London somewhere. And he then gets this I get this text message saying, hey, here, where are you? And I'm like, I've gone. He's like, what do you mean you've gone? You were going out. And I'm like, are we? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, no, actually, because, you know, you're late and I'm fed up of waiting for you. So no, he was never late again after that night.
Ooh.
His taxi, he had to spend like 20 quid or whatever it was to come and join us. And then he had to pay the club that we were going to, because he could have got him free if he'd have come with me. So he ended up 40 quid in under, pay his way in, never late again. Because I actually had a boundary that day. I could have had it any other time. But before, I'm like, yeah, little man, you know, it's fine. You can be late. You can be late.
Right.
A year or two. And then when I finally put my foot down, never late again. I just didn't have the confidence or the awareness to do that in the beginning, because I wanted to see him. He's my friend.
Right.
We make a change and we make a difference in our life, and we actually go, do you know what? We're not being cruel. I wasn't being cruel that night, but I was like, I'm off, mate. I'm off. I'm going. And I went. And it worked for me, but it's finding out ways that work for you. So like, say if you and I were dating and you basically turned up late all the time, and you know, you didn't know what was happening, there'd be a point where I'd be like 20 minutes late, 25 minutes, half an hour off. I wouldn't be waiting 30 minutes for someone. And constantly connecting with me, it's a genuine reason. But if you're late and you're not respecting the time that I've given you, because time is the only thing we can't get back. So that pisses people off so much. It's like Facebook out there selling your time, keeping you online so they can sell your data. Everybody's taking our time all the time. I give my time because it's a love language of mine and I want to spend time with someone, and you don't turn up on time and you leave me hanging around, you're not respecting what I'm giving you. And that can only happen once or twice without there actually being like, well, actually, this ain't going to work. And then you take that, but you need to give people the slack. You can't just be hard no.
Right.
Every guy I've ever met before me has been a dick. So now I'm going to accuse you of being one before you even are one. And that's how relationship. That's not going to work. So I'd have to give you grace. And you may have told me that you're late, Mr. Late. I'm like, okay, so I know he's Mr. Late, so I can be Mrs. Later too. I can come up late, but not to wind you up, but just I don't need to be there at 2:00 if I know you're not going to really be there.
Right. But again, this comes back to that communication piece, right? If I like, hey, so actually a question I've got in my head is, would it make a difference, right? So I know that this is a boundary, lateness, but you know, at different junctures in our lives, we are all sort of, at any one moment, we're sort of facing a different dragon. And dragon in this context just means something that I'm trying to work on as an individual, right? Perhaps punctuality is the current dragon that I'm, you know, facing, right? And I'm vocal about, hey, this is a dragon that I'm actively trying to, you know, conquer. Would that make a difference? That I'm aware that this is a boundary of yours. I respect the fact that this is important to you, but this is something that, based on where I am right now in my life, I am trying hard, but it's a process.
Yeah, it's a process, and it's a brilliant thing that you've mentioned there, because yes, that, for example, I dated a guy and we were texting, all going great, texting back and forth, just drops out of the ether for like 48 hours. Not that it's a problem if you don't text me for 2 days, that's fine. But when you've got consistency and then it drops,
it can feel the withdrawals.
Like, so I waited, and the third day I messaged him and said, hey, I hope you're well. Just wondering if everything's okay, because you were consistent and then you dropped, and just letting you know that, like, if you don't want to see me, that's absolutely fine. If you do, that's okay, but I've got to book a ticket, so I've got to come and see you. So I kind of need to know if this is over before, and cool, in that kind of sense. And he got straight back to me, typing, and then actually stopped typing and called me and said, hey, do you know what, actually, I just need to let you know, I'm sorry, you deserve a call. This is something I'm working on. My response to things is something I'm working on, and I dropped the ball, but I definitely want to see you, and yes, book your ticket. So it was over like that. Now, if he'd have not called me and not told me that this was something I'm working on, I'd have been like, this is a little red flag I'm marking in here. Right. And I'd have that little red flag, and then I've been looking for other red flags, because I've been like, going with this. The game of how many red flags can I find? And you said to me, you're, for example, you know, you're late and you're working on it. I would say, okay, well, here's how we do this. We'll work at it together. If this is a thing and you're interested, we'll work at it together. So for me, if we meet at 2:00, you have a 15-minute window. That 15-minute window is not lateness, it's life. Anything can happen.
Okay.
Life could happen, train could be late, whatever it is, 15 minutes here or so. If that's cool, if you rock up. If I don't hear from you, just saying I'm a couple minutes late or I'm going to be late, then there's no communication. Then I start to go into a worry after 15 minutes. Even after 10, some women are like, oh, what's going on? Are you alive? Has something happened to you? You me because you haven't communicated. But if you say ahead of time, I'll try and be there at 2. And I'm like, okay, I'm either expecting you to be a little bit later, which you've pre-warned me, or I know that there's going to be a little bit of a delay just because you've kind of like mentioned it in passing. Right. And I might recall it when you are late. And I'm like, okay. So, and life can happen. But if you're doing that continuously, you're not working on it. But if you actually tell me, you are working on it. So if you just keep turning up late, there's no work there. There's no you going, oh, it's a life process and I'm working on it. I'm working on it. How's that working out for you? If you're actually going, yeah, do you know what? I'm going to be late probably, or I'm just texting you or calling you, or babe, do you want to go for a little walk first before I come? Because I'm going to be another 10 or 15 minutes.
Right.
But it's the communication.
Right. And you're sort of, again, it's that you have insight into what's going on, and then your mind doesn't have an opportunity to wander off and think of the worst possible, you know, that's very...
On your way to me, you know, especially today in like, you know, for example, if you're going on a date and there's a riot in the street somewhere, and I'm waiting for you to turn up to meet me at, not that we're going on a date to Starbucks, but I was going to say you're meeting me in Starbucks, but imagine meeting me in Starbucks before we go for a date and there's a riot on the street or there's loads of stuff going on and you're just nowhere to be seen because you're like, yeah, I'll be there soon. And that soon's getting longer and there's more O's going in the word soon. And it's like, soon. And you're not there. It's a woman's prerogative. We're women. We're like, oh, what's happened? We think of the worst. We cave situation. So it's we think of something might have happened to you and then we go into a bit of trauma and then we start to panic and everything. And that is, if you know the surroundings and the situation and you know all the parameters, just drop a text and say, I'm going to be late.
Right.
And like, you might get a shit emoji back, like or like, you know, not good enough. I just send gifts to everyone. My gifts, I've got a picture of a cat, so it's a gif, and it's a cat filing its nails. So if anybody's late and they're taking the pic, I just send the cat, and I'm just like, I'm just there waiting. That you have, you know, dropped the ball, but I'm not going to let it go. Respect, and if you don't have respect on date 1, date 2, or date 3, with time. That's my red flag to say, hey, you ain't going to respect me in a year's time because you're meant to do the best work in the beginning when you meet someone. If you're not, the chances of you getting better down the line are going to be slim if there's no sign of respect in the beginning. And it's not, most women want to change their man. I ain't got time to change someone. I've spent all my time trying to change myself and work on the best version of myself. The guy. They need to work and change on that too. Or it's you might be great for someone else and we can be faithful. But it's that's just the simplest of it.
I love it.
I feel like I told you off though at the same time. Have I told you off? No, I haven't. Are you sat
here? I'm only fashionably late sometimes. So
well, if we never actually meet in person, you want to be 5 minutes early at least.
Okay. Now I know. Mental note.
And I'll turn up late and I'll be like, ironic, right?
There you go.
I try my best not to turn up late. And, no one's always on time unless you're military trained, which is from my family. We were very like military, dad in the Navy, mum in the army. Everything was done like 10 minutes before. But you can't live like that because you're literally living in a box of expectations that's always going to get broken. And I didn't want to, so I had to snap out of that. But
was it difficult? Like, what was that process like? Because that is sort of your familial conditioning, right? So how I assume that would be quite challenging to, so what was that like?
Feeling disappointed that people didn't take you seriously and that people didn't love you enough to show up or respect you. That was hard because you constantly feel like if some people aren't on time, you get to... It's also hard because you judge people in that state because you judge the entire person on whether they're late or not. And what I mean by that is if they're late and they're just like always late, you just go, oh, they don't care about anything. So you judge them for their whole life, and you're like, you don't care about anything anyway. You're always late. You're always disrespectful. So you've got this judgment towards people because that's who they've shown themselves to be in that full time frame. So I grew up with this space in myself of like expecting people to be on time, even though I wasn't on time for, you know, different things, but I was really good at getting there last minute and being on time. So if they have the same, you know, same efficiency as me just to get shit done, I'd be like, oh. So, and that wasn't a nice thing for me to do. That was me judging other people based on my experience, which is pretty harsh military wise. So I couldn't, you know, it didn't serve me in any way to continue bringing that habit forward and that assumption and that judgment forward. So, you know, and it was the guy that I was telling you about earlier that kept being later and later and later for me. He actually, you know, broke that cycle for me because I was ages. And, you know, seeing what panic I go into in that 40 minutes of lateness or whatever it was. And I used to hate going there, but I became really comfortable with that vulnerableness. So it actually trained me in a way just to let go and not be so anal about time. So if it's 20 minutes late, okay, it's a bit of a piss take, but cool. But, you know, there's times, you know, if you're late with your friends, fine. But if you're late to an interview, that's another each different factor that's another part of your life that you've got to seriously look at. Because if you want somebody to want me to pay you and you turn up late, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to pay you because legally I have to, but I'm not going to like you because I'm giving you something and you're not respecting me enough for it. And if that continuously happens, there's a problem with the other person. It's not necessarily a problem with you setting a 9 o'clock start time. There's a problem with the other person that may be going on. So if you've got someone that's working with you that is coming up late, don't have a go at them. Don't like penalize them straight away. Let them know you feel like they don't respect you, but do it from a place of love. But also at the same time, understand that what's going on for them at home to not turn up on time. And you know, some people will just automatically lie. So when they'll go into work late, and this is why I like to talk about this. So when you go into work late and you're like, hey, sorry, I'm late, traffic. And you're like, no, that's not real. That's not enough of an answer. What happened is you got up late or you went to bed late. You feel like shit. You've had a slower morning than usual. Everything's and now you're up here and you go, traffic. You're starting your day in a lie. You're starting your day with absolute bullshit. So the rest of your day is going to be that energy. I would say if I'm late, I'm like, I used to feel the lie coming. I could feel wherever it was being like, what do I need to say to this person? What do I need to say to this person? And I remember the first time it happened when I was really feeling this thing. And I actually was like, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to go in and tell them why I'm late. And I walked in and I was like, you know what? I had such a shit morning this morning. Like, I just couldn't get out of bed. And instead of this backlash of like, oh my God, that I was fearing, like, oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble. I was like, I couldn't get out of bed either. I felt so crap. Didn't even say anything at all about me being late. And I was like, oh, I was going to lie. Like, I was going to try. You don't need to. Most of the time, it's like if you don't respond to someone on their email straight away, and you don't reply, and you say, you know, you don't respond. When you respond to them, sorry, you go, sorry, I'm late. No, sorry, I haven't replied for long. And then you give them a whole life thing of what you've been doing. Don't do that. Just reply to the email. Don't apologize. And if it's been ages, you can say, hey, you know, apologies for the lateness, and then just tell them what you need to say. But don't tell them the lie or the reason why, because it's unnecessary. It's sufficient just to be honest. I've done it before and said, hey, oh, sorry, I've missed our call. I was actually, you know, I was on Ibiza the other week. I was like, sorry, I missed our call. I've been on the beach. I didn't come off in time. And they were like, oh, I'm on the beach. They didn't hate that I was on the beach.
Right.
But it's not professional, but it's my truth. I'm on the beach. Right. And I ain't getting, I'm white. I need some more sun. Can we do this later?
Yeah.
It's my truth. It's
but that
funny.
appeals to my humanity. That appeals to my humanity, right? Exactly. You know, it's we know that these things happen, but without being vulnerable, then like you said, I'm just getting the light. Oh, sorry, my laptop crashed, or Zoom wasn't working, or you know whatever other story. But I understand that fear of judgment, right? If I tell you that I woke up late and I'm having a shit morning, then does that mean you question my competence, right? Or like, how do you view me? How does that affect your impression of me, right? Because I've been in a situation where I was late, and I told literally why I was late, right? And it's like, well, no, that's not good enough, right? Which is fair enough, right? But so moving forward, I'm like, okay, maybe I won't lead with the truth this time. So I give the lie, and the lie actually ends up being more digestible than the truth, right?
Like
so that's where it gets a bit tricky, because you know what I mean? It's like with some individuals, like how true can I afford to be?
Okay, so we only lie because we're trying to control how the other person sees us.
This is true. This is true. I'm actually going to write that down. I'm going to write that down.
We only lie because we're trying to control how the other person sees us. And if it's your ability to be able to take a bollocking. By what I mean with that, if you go into somewhere and somebody says, this is not good enough, accept that, you know, you were meant to be there at 9, and you turning up at 25 past is not good enough. It's okay for someone to have a judgment on you and be right about it. But your ego's like, oh, well, I'm going to lie next time because I don't want to get this bollocking.
Preach.
Yeah. And you need to be okay with being told that you're not okay. And you need to be okay with that. Just let it go.
I love that. I want to just repeat that. So you need to be okay with being told that you are not okay.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
But you know, nobody wants to get told off.
No.
It's, you know, when we get told off, we do learn. We learn other people's boundaries. We learn how to be better versions of ourselves. It's not, you know, it's the way you get told off. If you get a beating because you're 5 minutes late, probably a bit excessive. But if someone says, "Do you think this is good enough?" and you go, "No, I'll try better next time," you've learned a life skill. You've learned not to piss someone off and to become more efficient. But when people get told off, you know, nobody wants that. But sometimes being told off, you know, don't touch that, it's hot, is gonna help you. You know, it's gonna help.
This is true. This is true, and it reminds me of a Ray Dalio quote, which is pain plus reflection equals growth, right? The pain and the shame of being told off for being 20, 30 minutes late. You know, I reflect on that. Oh, how did I feel in that? I didn't like that feeling. So don't put yourself back in. Right. I don't want to be in that position again. So I'm going to take ownership and manifest my own agency, as opposed to just dismissing it as, oh, they're just, you know, just a bit too uptight, or whatever else that I can conjure up with as a way to sort of shirk responsibility for my actions.
Do you know what? There's something that I feel that I've worried about this a little bit, and I've thought, and I'm like, do you know, how are they going to cope? Because, you know, with COVID coming on, and, you know, lots of people are saying, do you know what, I don't want this full-time job anymore. I'm going to go and work for myself, and I'm going to go start a business.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have personal responsibility in their lives as it is today, whether they're working for someone else or not. A lot of people don't know how to show up for themselves and other people. A lot of people don't know what respect really is, and they don't know how to manage themselves. And that is a major problem, especially when you're going to go and be working for yourself. If you're going to go and work for yourself, you need to learn all those life skills, and it's going to be very hard to run a business when you don't have them. And there's a lot of people out there that want to be entrepreneurs because they think it's better, but don't know how to be human beings first. And that is going to be a problem. Business, because you're going to learn the hard way. I mean, but, you know, you turning up at 9 o'clock and having to work for someone else has been your safety net of you not having to look at your own bullshit. When that safety net's not there, who are you? Can you turn up to yourself every day? Where's the driving factor? Where's the guarantee of money coming? Because it ain't going to be guaranteed unless you get out of bed. That's personal responsibility. And that's not readily available when you don't have a set income coming in at the end of the month. This
is true.
Yeah,
Preach.
So, preach. I preach.
I'm just gonna hold the space.
We had a joke about yeah, we won't go there today. But I've just realised it's like 8 minutes past, so we've actually talked for over an hour, which has been delightful.
Oh, likewise. Thoroughly enjoyed.
We're going to have you back, right? You're going to come.
Oh,
back.
Yeah. Absolutely. But
you were on time for this one. So
I was.
You know what? Now I know how difficult it is for you to not be on time. I appreciate that you made.
How has this turned into a me thing?
I love this. Harry, please tell everybody where they can hear about you, what they can do, where they can follow you. Tell us a little bit about your kind of monthly coaching stuff as well. That would be great.
Right. So you can find me on www.harryudoh.com, UDDOH. You can find me on Instagram at Harry_Udoh, UDDOH. You can email me directly, me at Harryudoh, UDDOH.com. And so my coaching community, how do I describe the coaching community? I would say that we're a group of individuals who have sort of come together to try and point out each other's blind spots, because the truth is everybody has blind spots, and nobody has all the answers, right? And like we've alluded to in this conversation, the moment you start to think, or even from my perspective, when I start to think, well, I'm a relationship coach, I know how things should be, then that can become very, very problematic. So what I love about the community is I basically get to, host sessions in public, right? So all my any sort of biases I may have, any sort of, flaws in my thinking, or so-called logic, I get other people who can keep me accountable and say, oh, hey, Harry, here's something you didn't look at, or here's the converse. And then as a consequence of that, I grow, and also everyone else listening gets an opportunity to grow, right? So we have a range of activities that take place over the course of the week, from happy hour sessions where you essentially come on to a Zoom call with whatever it is, a coffee, drink, your substance of choice, and we just shoot the shit, we decompress, right? We have what I call relational dynamic sessions, where we are pondering a question such as, why is respect important in a relationship? Or one that came up last week actually is, if you were envious of your partner, would you feel comfortable sharing with them? Ooh. And why? Right. So these are the sort of conversations that we have, and we try and create a space where, look, it's okay to fuck shit up. It's okay to get things wrong. One of my favorite philosophers says, we do death to our thoughts so that we may live. Right. So it's okay to have a thought that is outrageous. It's a thought, right? And if I share this with you, then I have the opportunity for you to come in and say, oh, hey man, look, I think that's here's why I think that thought is a bit wonky, right? And then I can review, right? Yeah. And then my lived experience doesn't have to be the manifestation of that convoluted way of thinking, right? So this is what we do in the community. It's a lifestyle movement of people who are not afraid to be wrong. We're not afraid to be wrong. So we're learning about relationships with others, the relationship we have with ourselves. We talk about our fears, our insecurities, boundaries, and everything else that's sort of in between. And we love to bring on inspiring guest speakers, Nat. So I would love to have you on. I know I'm putting you on the spot now live. I would love to have you on.
Yeah, I would love to. Like, talking is my thing. It's, my teacher said at school, you're either going to, be famous for talking, or you're going to get into a lot of trouble. And oh, my camera just went off then. I don't know if it's still there. It's still there, I think it is. Is it coming back? No, I don't know where I've gone. Don't know where that is. Where are we? Ah, that's why, because I've got to press start cam. That might help.
Gotcha.
There you go. Hold on. There you go. I'm back. The answer to that question was yes, even though I went into the darkness. It's a hell yes.
Lovely.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Hold on. I've got a guest. Hi, Dad. I don't know. I'm on a live call. Okay. Thanks. Ask him if the radiator's on. The answer is no. The radiator is not on. Bless. See, this is how real it is, and talkative, and just it is there. But thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to have you back for the Talkwoods, which will start on the 3rd of January. We're going to have a talk show every single day from 7 in the evening till 9 in the evening, with multitude of guests. We've got sports stars. We're going to have DJs. We've got general human beings. We're going to be talking about our most uncomfortable subjects. It's the Talkwoods, which is the awkward talks about things that matter, in the aim of keeping us all sane for January and going through this together on a mental health perspective, and saving some lives, hopefully saving some lives. Keep staying with us. But Harry, thank you so much. And if you want to hear anything
Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. If you want to hear anything else from us, you can reach out to where'snatat.com, or you can join me on the radio at iamsoundacademy.com. And we'll see you next time. Harry, I'll see you on the other side of the broadcast, but everybody else will say goodbye to. Right, now I've got a little outro. Look, I'm going to play my outro and then we'll
let's go. Let's go.